those wonderful mountains, the forests, the fjords. It's just a place that I never get sick of. And quite honestly, my job with Department of Conservation before I retired from full-time work with the department wasn't like a job at all. It was a way of life. I used to get up in the morning and think, what adventures am I going to have today?
In the wildest, emptiest, and most beautiful corner of New Zealand lies a cherished world where mountains and valleys compete with each other for room. Scale is almost beyond comprehension. Rainfall is measured in meters, and scenery encompasses the broadest width of emotions. For thousands of years, natives and explorers alike have found it a place of inspiration and solitude. In the words of author Rudyard Kipling, it is the eighth wonder of the world. This is Fjordland National Park.
Fjordland to me is the last frontier. Fjordland to me is our natural heritage. It's our largest remaining piece of natural heritage that we have.
At over 12,000 square kilometers, Fjordland is one of the largest national parks in the world. Covering 5% of the entire landmass of New Zealand, the sheer scale of Fjordland defies description. The first people to inhabit this native wonderland, nearly 1,000 years ago, were East Polynesian navigators who were the ancestors of a people that later became known as the Maori. They named the region Te Waihipunamo, or the place of greenstone, after the treasured jade that was once bountiful in its valleys. Following their spiritual goal of being at one with nature, the Maori came to know every secret that Mother Nature held about this rugged paradise and were content to live in isolation from the rest of the world. But it would not be long before the destiny of two different peoples were to collide. From the 16th century, world maps often showed an imagined southern landmass at the bottom of the globe to balance the known land in the north. European explorers made daring journeys across uncharted waters to discover this vast Terra Australis Incognita, or unknown southern land. Dutchman Abel Tasman was the first European to sight New Zealand in 1642 while on a mission from the Dutch East India Company, but he declared the land unsuitable to provide for their material interests and moved on. It wasn't until 130 years later, on October the 6th, 1769, when Captain James Cook's cabin boy, Nicholas Young, spotted land from the deck of the Endeavour. Milford Sound is the pinnacle of a largely untouched landscape that defies description. So much of New Zealand's local and European history took place in what is now the wildest, emptiest, and most beautiful corner of the land. That a landscape created by such turmoil could be so peaceful is a paradox of Mother Nature.
It's the largest national park we have in New Zealand, and it's actually 5% of the land area of New Zealand. Nobody lives in it. It's just a magnificent wilderness. 1.2 million hectares or 3.5 million acres, take your pick. Mountains as high as Mount Tutoko, 9,042 feet high at its summit, with glaciers, permanent ice fields up there, right down to the very deep fjords. For instance, the average depth of Milford Sound is 330 metres, all the way from the mouth of the sound right to the head. So that's well over 1,000 foot of water below the keel of the ship as we sail in. Lots of people wonder, how can a large ship like this go into such a narrow waterway, thinking that it's probably quite shallow, but it's deeper than it is wide in places. It's quite incredible.
So Milford Sound was one of the last sounds to be. By the way, these are not real sounds. They are fjords. Captain Cook got that wrong. He didn't get many things wrong, but calling them sounds. A sound is a drowned river valley, and a fjord is a glaciated valley. So these things should be called Milford Fjord and Dusky Fjord, but of course they're sounds, and we're stuck with that. Milford Sound wasn't discovered by Captain Cook. He totally bypassed it, and you'll see why, because it's a very, very narrow entrance, and it's a beautiful place to get up. The sun rises over the mountains, the Southern Alps, and as you come into that lovely narrow entrance, the sides of the field go right up alongside the ship. You think, great, we won't get off into this sound. It's just too narrow. But the ship gets in there, and as it gets right down the sound, you'll see that there is space to turn around as well. But it is a very tight fit getting into Milford Sound, but it is fantastic.
Well, Fjordland is literally mountains of water, so we get quite consistent rainfall, but the big permanent waterfalls such as the Stirling and Bowen Falls at Milford Sound, for example, they are fed continually by melting snow and ice in the Darren Mountains, and then of course when it does rain they really perform. They actually leap right out from their hanging valleys and plunge down to the field below. So both those waterfalls over 150 metres in height. So when we look at the Stirling Falls going into Milford, that's equal, if you imagine, stand back and look at it, to a 50-storey building in height. So we can sort of relate that. And certainly quite spectacular. And when it does rain, when it really rains, I say to people, Fjordland is just as beautiful on a really wet day as it is when the sun is shining, because that's truly Fjordland National Park, mountains of water. It's just a whole seascape or mountainscape of water.
You get all kinds of weather in Milford Sound. Sunny day, it's absolutely beautiful because you see the mountain peaks behind. most of the time it's raining. Look, Milford has one of the highest rainfalls in New Zealand, about 30 feet of rain a year. That's easy to say quickly, but it's 10 metres of rain in a year. And when it's raining, you often get a very nice cloud effect. The cloud actually hangs down below the mountain peaks. It just looks very airy, very strange, but it's just beautiful. I just love going in there in the rain because the waterfalls are flowing, and the whole scene is just quite weird, but you'll just love it when you get in there alongside those very, very steep U-shaped cliffs.
Coming to Fjordland and visiting New Zealand is coming to a place that's old New Zealand, olden times, back in history, unchanged. Sure enough, there is some infrastructure around the most visited place, the head of Milford Sound, but the rest of the park is unchanged. And to do a scenic cruise down the coastline of Fjordland National Park is truly an amazing experience. And especially so as we get further south into the remoter parts, south of Doubtful Sound.
Further north was a sound that Captain Cook himself refused to enter on his first journey, as he was extremely doubtful that he could harbor his ship there and still make it back out to sea. Having named it Doubtful Sound, the Endeavour continued north, surpassing one of Fjordland's most charming hidden secrets. Sometimes called the Sound of Silence, Doubtful Sound is filled with an atmosphere of solitude and serenity. Whether it's the overwhelming 421-meter depth of the fjord or the breathtaking waterfalls that cascade down the steep cliffs, in this ancient landscape, one is compelled to whisper.
I've seen it in various different lights. I've seen it when it's been beautiful blue sunshine, which is spectacular to see, but also I've seen it when it's been low cloud, misty and raining. And that also is quite spectacular, because out of those clouds, down the side of these sheer mountains, more or less, that come straight up out of the fjord, you have all these waterfalls kind of cascading down into the fjord. So that's also pretty spectacular as well.
Some of these early explorers, particularly James Cook, named a lot of these sounds. He named them for a reason. Doubtful Sound, for instance, when he saw it, it was doubtful whether it was going to be a harbour that was going to be safe for him to get into. So, Doubtful Sound. This is all reasons behind all these names that Captain Cook gave as he went around New Zealand. But Doubtful Sound is just another example. Dusky Sound. These are names given by James Cook. There are many place names around New Zealand which were first named by James Cook.
The fjords, or as they're commonly called, the sounds of Fjordland, 14 in all, were actually ice-carved valleys that have been flooded by the sea. Very steep sides and U-shaped bottoms to them. And the interesting thing is that the shallowest part of them is out near the mouth, because when they're formed, they're carved out by the glaciers, which pick up lots of rock as they travel slowly down the valleys. And when the terminal face of the glaciers meets the sea, the ice melts and all that rock falls to the bottom of the ocean. So you get a shallower lip, but still 100 to 80 to 100 metres deep near the mouth of most of the sounds. Certainly not a hazard to navigation. The mountains are formed of very hard rock in Fjordland, and it's a very slow process of weathering. But the big onshore seas coming up from the subantarctic areas crash against the southern coast of Fjordland and wear it away, so it's a very rugged, very rough coastline.
It was on Captain Cook's second voyage to New Zealand in 1773 aboard the Resolution that he finally ventured into the mysterious wilderness of Fjordland. Following 123 harrowing days in the icy, ferocious Southern Ocean, Cook sought refuge right here in Dusky Bay. At 40 kilometers long and up to 8 kilometers wide, Dusky Sound is one of the largest and most complex fjords in the whole of Fjordland, and also contains the largest island in the region, aptly named Resolution Island. Always the pioneer, Cook established workshops and an observatory where astronomer William Wales could conduct scientific experiments.
The effect of Fjordland on me spans more than the 38 years I worked as a park ranger, because I came here when I was at school and did a number of amazing backcountry hikes, and I think it's just the fascination of the place. And I found working in the park as a ranger one of the most challenging things that I've ever done. It's a place where one day was never the same. Every day was different, and you just didn't know what challenge was going to come up next. But it was very fulfilling, and just to see people's faces and the enjoyment and the satisfaction they got out of visiting Fjordland National Park has certainly been a pleasure to be a ranger working in the national park as I was many years ago.
20 years ago when I first went, I mean, the first time you ever go and see it, particularly by sea, it really takes your breath away. I mean, it's just spectacular. Awe-inspiring, I think, is probably a word that you might use for it. And every other time that I've been back, I have so many photographs and in different lights, you know, with the sun shining, depending on which time of the day you go, whether you go in the afternoon or whether you go in the morning, you see it in different lights. I've seen it in different weather conditions. So no matter how many times you go, even from my first time to perhaps going this time as well, it still really takes your breath away.
It's actually part of the Te Waipunamu World Heritage Area of New Zealand, and we're very proud of that wonderful, massive national park of ours. It's just a wonderful place to be.
Fjordland to me is the last frontier. Fjordland to me is our natural heritage. It's our largest remaining piece of natural heritage that we have. It's very precious. It's a wild wilderness, and when you get into any part of it, especially the remote parts, they're unchanged. They were like this when Captain Cook was here back in 1773, for example, and have remained unchanged. And what's preserved Fjordland in that respect is its remoteness. It is a wild place. It's a place of extremes in terms of climate. It's a place that's challenging to get to, and those challenges, I suppose, have led to its own protection in a way, where it's made us human beings look quite small. And it's a place of purity. You know, it's in terms of the landscape, in terms of the water and the wildlife, the flora and fauna. It is an amazing place.
As humans, we are witness to but a moment of her complex history, but she has many more stories to tell us. All we have to do is stand still and listen.